Hey guys, welcome back to another video in this series. And I know I'm wearing the same shirt that I was wearing yesterday, my little university shirt. That's because I'm actually recording this after I was finished recording the other one. I kind of got inspired, and even though there's other things I need to do, once inspiration hits, you need to make sure you make good use of it. I hate the camera. I'm gonna change this to manual focus for the next video. I promise, so that this thing doesn't switch between like the background and the foreground. Anyway, so before we move on to the instance, the layer material setup, which is rather tricky, but hopefully I'm going to be able to explain it cool for you. Just want to remind you that we have our portfolio review this weekend. You can check the link down here below, and I'll be happy to check your work. Other than that, just remember that we do have our Skillshare promotion, and you guys know the drill. Here's the video. Hey guys, Abraham here. I just wanted to remind you guys that we upload all of our courses to Skillshare. Skillshare is this amazing site where you can access a ton of different content to learn, improve, and grow as an artist. We have all of our courses available to watch and learn from right now in Skillshare. You can check the description down here, and Skillshare is offering 1 free month trial to their premium membership. With this membership, you're going to be able to access all of our courses and watch and learn all of the amazing things that we cover with all of the softwares. So, what are you waiting for? Check Skillshare down here below. There we go. So this is it, guys. This is Ogre Mountain, and we have it here inside of Unreal Engine. And I've done a couple of things. I want to make sure that I had the process like perfectly clear before I recorded this. So this is the final result. I'm actually going to be starting from scratch, of course, and I'm going to show you every single step. And not only that, I also added the collisions. This is a super not optimized collision, but the cool thing is that we can actually walk on top of the mountain. As you can see right here, we can go to the brows, to the nose. And as we mentioned before, the important thing about this, the reason why this process is so important is because if you're going to be doing a super huge asset like this one, right? And we want to be able to use it like multiple times maybe or whatever. We can't rely on 4K texture. Like, see how much area we would need to cover with a texture, right? And we don't want to use just one single like tiling material. It's always cool to be able to blend between different layers and create something that looks really, really complex. You can actually do blends with, I don't know, hundreds of layers if you want and create a super, super amazing thing. In this case, we're going to keep it simple with just 3 layers as we did before on the Substance Painter side of things. But yeah, this is it. And the cool thing is this is actually using nanite, as we've mentioned before. So even the collisions are like a nanite thing. And yeah, I mean, I can just grab this guy right here. The pivot point is not where it's supposed to be, but I can duplicate this a couple times. Remember, this guy was, I believe, like 5 point something million polys. So when I hit play here, yes, it's going to be a little bit of, there's going to be a little bit of a hit in performance, but look at this. I've just created a mountain range with this like ogre faces that my character can navigate through. So I remember when I wanted to do this sort of thing several years ago, it was just impossible, or not impossible. It required so much preparation, optimization to make sure this works. Look at this, like here, the two things just blend together. Yes, there's going to be a little bit of a seam right there, of course, but as you can see, from a gaming perspective or from a world building perspective, I think this is just an amazing technology. So as you can see down here, the setup is actually tricky. There's a lot of things going on here. So I'm going to create a new folder here and I'm going to explain what's happening. I'm not going to go over importing the nanite thing. We've already done that before. So let's call this Ogre Mountain snow. Let's do like a snowy Ogre Mountain, because we can use the exact same masks that we had before for something that looks a little bit more interesting. So the way this works is as follows. We're going to be using a material, a traditional normal material, just here. And we're going to call this material a layered layer material. Okay, this is going to be our basic like layer material setup. Now, in order for us to use or to utilize this layer material, we need 2 things, and these are very important. First of all, we need something called a material layer. So we're going to go right click and we're going to go to blueprints, or sorry, materials. And it's this thing called material layer. I'm gonna call this M or ML as material layer base, because we're gonna be using this quite a bit. And then we're gonna need another thing here in material, which is called a material layer blend. I'm gonna call this ML a blend. Now, as you guys know, I'm not an expert on the on game development. I'm more in the artist side of things. So there might be a couple of things performance-wise that could be done better, but that's something that you're gonna have to check with your studio. All of this information, by the way, comes from the official the like Unreal Engine documentation. So yeah, so let's start with the material base, and this is It took me a little while to understand how this works and why this works the way it works, but now that I know, it's actually quite simple. So the way the material base works is you will input parameters into it that you can then change an instance so that you can modify the layers however you want. So let's go. The way this works is very simple. As you can see, we have the output material attributes, we have the set material attributes, and we have this input material attributes. So this node right here is expecting to receive material information so that it can like spit it out as a material layer. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use a node called, I got my notes over here, make material attributes. So make material attributes. And as you can see, this is pretty much the exact same thing we have on any material we create when we create a material here inside of Unreal. You can do a lot of things. I'm going to keep it really simple. It's just a basic like PBR material. But if you are experienced on creating like crazy looking materials, moving textures, like mathematic parameters and stuff like that, you can make them here and create them into a layer material. So it's kind of like creating a normal traditional material, but with more capabilities to customize it. And here's where things get interesting. So we need to create a basic like setup, color, like roughness, all that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna be using Substance 3D assets because it's gonna give us more, like a better looking thing. This is one of those things where having this sort of elements can be really, really good because we can use, like, if I look for rock, right? Have all of this like rock textures. So I can look for a rock texture that looks closer to what I want to go for, like this bleach chisel rock. This one looks pretty cool. So I'm going to download this, and you are going to have to install into your Unreal the Substance plugin. So if you go here to plugins and you type in Substance, as you can see, I have the Substance in Unreal Engine 5 plugin. It's completely free. You need to download it from the store and install it to your engine. But once it's here, it's going to allow you to use the SVSR files so that we don't have to go into into Substance and export things. I'm going to now look for snow because we're going to have some snow. I like this one. Let's download it. And instead of having sand, you remember on the Ogre thing, we had like the sand and the moss and like dirt. Instead of having sand, I think it would be quite like interesting to have some like mud, right? Sometimes when it's relatively common to have like dirty sand and mud and stuff like that. So I think mud's gonna work just fine. So I'm gonna look for this like mud slut wither that we have right here. I think this one looks interesting. So let's download this. Cool. So as you can see, I'm downloading all of the elements, and now we're just gonna start importing them. Just gonna move this to the side. And in here, in this, like, let's just save this real quick. In this, like, file that we have right here, I'm going to grab my bleach chisel rock. That's the one that I'm going to start with. When you do this, it creates this whole thing. If you've never used the Substance before, the Substance plugin before, it's a really, really strong plugin that allows you to change the parameters of the object. So for instance, if the stone that I have right here looks too light or too dark, I can actually change the parameters, and the textures that we have right here are going to be adapting to those parameters. It's really, really powerful. We're going to be using a little bit of that in just a second. So now we have the textures. As you can see, we have base color, normal, roughness, metallic, and ambient occlusion. So I'm going to go back to the base thing right here, and I'm going to inject all of those textures in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Grab them in there, just like move them and get them into a nice organized way. Some people like to work like full screen with this or have like tabs. I personally like to have them as windows because I can work with 2 monitors. There we go. So the thing we're going to do is we're going to connect all of these guys to their respective material. So this is the color, goes into color. This is the normal, goes into normal. This is the roughness, goes into roughness. This is the ambient occlusion, goes into ambient occlusion. And this is the metallic, it goes into metallic. Right now, again, very similar to setting up a normal material, but here's where the magic starts. I'm going to right-click each one of them, and I'm going to convert them to a parameter. I'm going to call the parameter whatever they're representing. So in this case, this is the color, right? It's the color parameter. There we go. This is the normal parameter. So right-click, convert to parameter, normal. This is the roughness parameter. Right-click, convert to parameter, roughness. And finally, this is the parameter for the metallic. So in this case, we're not really using a metallic, but if we were to have a layer material that has metallic properties, this will allow us to input a map into the layer, into the metallic parameter. Now, one thing that I know we're going to be using is tileable textures, right? Like we want to tile this thing so that it covers the whole section of the mountain. So to do that, I'm actually going to create something called a texture coordinate, which allows me to repeat or tile the elements. You can see 1 and 1 right here. But unfortunately, we can't really make this into a parameter. So we need to use a little bit of programming magic. This texture coordinate, as you can see right now, is set to 1, 1. So it's just like the placing the texture on a 1-to-1 ratio. It's just tiling it 1 time. If we want to tile this more times, we're going to use something called a multiply. So we're going to multiply the tiling value by a parameter. So I'm going to press 1 and click to create a new parameter. And this is going to be the tiling parameter. So just right click, convert this to a parameter as well. And we're going to call this tiling. By default, the tiling is going to be 1. So by default, there's not going to be any tiling on my material. But if I need to tile the materials as many times as I want, I just need to modify that float right there, and it's going to tile this thing as many times as needed. So as you can see, I'm just like inputting this all into the UV sections, and there we go. This has now been completed. This is a complete layer, like material layer that we can utilize to create the magical thing, which is the material instance. Yeah, this is where it gets confusing because some of you might be like, well, if we already have the material, can't we just like drag this thing and get it in here? No, as you can see, we can't drag a material layer onto an object. We need to use a material, but we can't drag this layer into the material unless it's an instance so that we have more chances to modify it because we're going to have several materials, right? So I'm going to right click this thing. I'm going to create a layer instance and I'm going to call this MLI, material layer instance. That's the way I like to organize my stuff. And I'm going to call this a rock, like a gray rock. Okay. And there we go. So now this instance right here is very cool. It's very magical because as you can see, we now have access to the ambient occlusion, to the color, to the metallic, to the normal, to the roughness, if we want to change it. If we don't want to change it, which in this case, we really don't want to do it, we don't have to, but we can go to the tiling, for instance, and say, hey, you know what? I want this thing to tile like 60 times, right? It's going to be tiling 60 times. And now when we use this material on the object, it will tile 60 times because we're modifying the parameters on an instance, okay? If you guys don't know about the difference between an instance and an object, let me know in the comments and I'll clarify that in another video. But that's one of like the core things that works here inside of Unreal and other softwares as well. So there we go. We have our gray rock layer. Cool. Now we need the next couple of layers. So let's go, for instance, for the moth, right? Which was the second layer. So I'm going to grab my moth slush wither, get it in here with the substance archive, import it. And I should have, as long as it finishes doing its thing, well, here we have, again, the colors. Here's where it starts. We don't have to do the base again. We just grab the base, right-click, create a layer instance, and this is going to be called material layer instance moth. Double-click, and now, or just enter, and now what we do is we turn on all of the channels right here, and we tell it, hey, we want to use these channels, but we don't want to use this basic textures that we had before. We want to use the moth ambient occlusion. We want to use the moth color. We want to use the moth metallic. We want to use the moth normal. And we want to use the moth roughness. And there we go. So now our material, this moth material, works exactly as we would expect. I'm going to save it, and there we go. Let's do this one more time now with the ice or with the snow. So we drag the snow here. We import all of the assets. I'm getting messages. I hate when I get messages when I'm recording. Give me just 1 second, guys. Let's see what's happening here. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so we've imported the snow, and now we need to repeat the process. So I'm going to go to my base layer material, this one, right click, create a layer instance, and this is now going to be MLI underscore snow. There we go. So in this one, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to tell it, hey, we want to use all of these channels. But we don't want this texture. So I'm going to tell you exactly which ones I want, which are these ones right here. So this is the ambient occlusion for the snow. This is the base color for the snow. This is the metallic for the snow. This is the normal for the snow, and this is the roughness for the snow. And we're definitely gonna be tiling it, but I'm gonna hold on to that one a little bit before, so that you can see the change. So let's delete some of this, guys. Let's just keep one for now. There we go. And yeah, now what we need to do is we need to set up the blend layer. So right now we have the layers. Imagine as if we're using ingredients on a cake, right? So we have the flour, the milk, the eggs. But how we blend them together, that's why this ML blend is here for. And there's a couple of ways to set this up. I'm gonna give you a very simple like graph that you can use to set this one up. And it's basically, it tells you, hey, this is the input layer, this is the top layer, and you're going to be using an alpha channel or something to blend these things into it. Normally, when we use masks, one way to save a little bit of space is to use the same technique that we use for the ambient occlusion roughness metallic. We save each mask on one of the different channels. But in this case, when we did the export, each mask is a different file, so it's going to work exactly the same. So I'm going to use a texture sampler. So texture sample. There we go. This is going to be a parameter. Convert parameter, it's going to be called mask. And if you were using all of the channels, they recommend doing this thing called append, which allows you to append the alpha channel into a single channel, so we can access that channel, because normally the RGB only spits out RGB, right? So by doing this append, now we have RGBA coming from this little pin right here, and we're going to use something called a masks parameter. So right click, and it's going to be a channel parameter. So channel mask parameter. There we go. We're going to call this mask, which, as you can see right now, is accessing the red channel by default, but we can eventually change that. And that's going to go into the alpha channel. As you can see, it's saying, hey, there's an error. Why? Because we don't have anything, right? Well, if we were to navigate to our Ogre section, you guys remember that we had the blending masks. Blending mask 1, blending mask 2, and blending mask 3. So I'm going to grab the blending masks here. So mask blending, and mask blending, and drag them into our element right here. So we can grab the first one, which is this mask. The first one, which is the sand, and we're gonna use this one. Actually, let's delete this one. Just bring it in here, and this is gonna be RGB, and this is gonna be alpha, and we just hit save. This is of course gonna be a parameter, and this is gonna be known as a mask parameter. Perfect. So now this is also a base. So this is the base blend, because right now we're selecting one specific mask. So we need to have 3 blends so that we know which blend blends which thing, right? So I'm going to right click, create a blend instance. I'm going to call this blend. This was going to be, let's call this sand. I know it's not the sand, but just so that we remember the old textures. And then if you double click here, you can see that we are using the basic, the blending mask, which is fine. And then I'm going to create a new instance, and this is going to be the moss. I know we had a 4th one on substance, but I'm just gonna keep it to 3 now to keep it simple. I'm gonna use a mask right here, and this guy right here, the mask 3, as you remember, that's the moss. So we just drop that one in there and hit save. So now this blend sand and this blend moss are blend instances, material blend instances that we're gonna use to blend the layers of the element. Finally, we can go to the actual material. So this AMP layer material that we created at the very beginning, which is where we're going to be connecting everything, this is where we're going to be doing the magic. And it's, I would say, rather simple, a lot simpler than I thought it was going to be honest. We need 4 specific, a couple of specific nodes. Let me tell you which ones they are, because I don't know them by heart. There we go. So the first thing is on this guy right here, we're going to select the use material attributes. That way, this becomes a material attribute thing instead of a material channel. And then we're going to do something called set material attributes. Okay, and to set the material attribute, we need to get the material attributes. So we're going to get the material attributes that we want. We're going to set them as the material attributes, and we're going to spit that out into the final material. And to get the material attributes, here's where we're going to be using the material attribute layers. There. It's just this very simple thing. You can get way more complex in here. You can actually after you do the layer, you can input extra textures like a specific normal maps or a specific color information or a specific glow information. But that's something that we're going to leave for another time because it's definitely a little bit more complicated. Right now, I just want to give you the basic way to create this layering system. So on this material layer attributes, as you can see, by default, we have a background layer, which is the base layer. So that means that we technically only need 2 more layers, one for the mud and one for the snow, right? So I'm going to click this default layer here. That's layer 1. I'm going to click this default layer here, and that's layer 2, and we're going to save. That's it. Nothing else that we need to do, because again, this is just a base material that we're going to be using to create as many variations as we want. So finally, I'm going to right click this material and I'm going to create an instance out of that material. And this instance I'm going to call Ogre. I'm going to call it material instance Ogre Snow Mountain. There we go. So in here is where we're gonna build our layer, like our actual layer material. I'm actually gonna try to make this a bit smaller so you can see how this is gonna go. I'm gonna drop this one in here. As you can see, by default, like there's nothing. We're only seeing like this glossy material. Look at the amazing like nanite detail. This is just great. We don't need a normal map because we have all of this information, which is, it's just amazing. So if we go to the layer parameters, you're going to see that we have the option to add stuff to this layer. So let's go to the background. And if we go to our like layer instance material, we have the snow, we have the mow, and we have the gray rock. Let's grab the gray rock and drop it in here. And as you can see, once it finishes compiling, now we have the gray rock. So if we get closer to our character, we're going to be able to see the size of the rock. Now, I do think the tiling is a little bit too much. What do? Do we go all the way back to the layer instance? No, that would be too troublesome. If we open the layer asset right here, you're going to see that we actually have access to the layer parameters, the textures and everything. So here, what we can do is we can open the scalar material and say, hey, we don't want 60, we would just want like 30, right? And that way, as you can see, the amount of size or the size of the rock is going to be way, way less than what we have. And look at this. I have this super cool looking mountain with a lot of detail on it that's going to make it look quite nice. Now, let's go to the next one. The next layer is going to be the mud, right? Like the crevices before the snow covers them. So for the crevices, I'm going to grab the mud and I'm going to drop it right here. Now, as you're about to see, what's going to happen here is now we have the mud on top of the character. And look how ugly it looks. It looks really ugly because on the original instance, we didn't change the tiling. Remember that? So again, we can go here to the layer assets and we can say, hey, you know what? Let's style this a little bit more. Let's go to like 50 so that we have a nice, like a nice effect on the layering right there. That looks quite nice, I would say. So now we use the blend asset. Here's where the blend assets come into play because we can use the blend sand, which I don't know, it's supposed to be sand or mud or whatever, which is the first max that we created. And we can drop this right here. And as you're about to see, what's going to happen is now we're going to see this thing piling up. Look at this beautiful thing, piling up where the sand was. So like you can see it right there and right here. And if we were to modify the mask in Substance Painter and export it again, we would get, of course, a different effect. So that's it. That looks quite nice. As you can see again, look at the blending between the two materials there with a really nice size in the texture, which is really, really cool. And finally, we can go all the way up here to the snow material. And we can say, hey, okay, the layer for the snow is going to be this instance snow. We drop it right there. It's going to look super ugly at first because, as you can see, it's really big. We can go to the assets, to scalar, and say, hey, scale this a little bit more. Let's go for like a 40 so that we can actually see like the way the snow banks are formed and everything. And then, of course, we go to the blend asset, and now we're going to use the blend moss as the blend snow, right? To make sure that we only have snow in a couple of points. Look at that. And that's it. So if we've successfully created a standard or a instance material where we have snow, sand, and everything together. Did I not save that? Save. Implicit truncation. What the hell is that? Did I not select something? Snow, mud, blend, rock. No, it should be working. That's really weird. I'm not sure what's going on right now or why that did not work. Let's give it a shot here. I'm not sure if I'm running out of memory. Could be because we're working with big stuff right here. Maybe I forgot to save this one. Save. Warning, implicit truncation of vector type. Okay, so that means that there's some sort of vector thing. So that means a texture. There's a texture that's not like working properly. One thing you can do, by the way, you can toggle the visibility of the layers. So for instance, right there, I've just toggled the visibility of the snow layer. Let's save and see if it was there. Okay, it seems to be on the snow layer then. Is it on the snow layer? Yeah, okay, so on the snow layer. So that means that the snow layer this MLI snow has something that needs to be fixed. Some truncating value, it says, which is really weird. Okay, let's try something. Let's go to this guy right here. And since we're not really using, what's the word? We're not really using metallic, so we could technically turn it off. Let's save it. That's really weird. Debug pixel shader mode. 16 exceeded. Huh. Not really changing anything here that I didn't modify before. I'm gonna have to take that as a homework, guys, and see why that's happening. Because as you saw with the other one, with the moss and the green one, it was working just fine. Here the size is a little bit weird, but well, hopefully this information is helpful for you guys. Again, I'll take this as a homework to try and pinpoint what the problem was. But look at this. This is what we want to achieve. Now, I know that I did this very, very fast, especially on the substance one yesterday, where we just added a couple of generators. But you can imagine the power that we have when we actually go in and paint where we want the snow, where we want the dirt, where we want the rock, and that's the technique. This is one of the proper techniques to use in order to generate the sort of like giant objects that we can use to what's the word, to, well, yeah, to render out things like this mountain. So yeah, that's it for this one, guys. Again, I'm gonna take a look on why that error happens. I didn't get it when I was doing the practice, but as you can see, we get a really, really, really cool effect. You can see the little guy all the way there on the top. There we go. It seems to be some sort of shader issue. Let's go back to the other one. So I'm gonna go to the original Ogre Mountain that we were working with, and we have this one right here. As you can see, that's the sand and the moss right there, and you can see the character all the way there on the top. So hopefully all of this information, as I mentioned, was good for you guys. Thank you very much for being here. This is probably the last one about this topic. We're gonna jump back to some more like prop and character stuff. So let me know in the comments what other things would you like to learn about, and I'll be happy to help you out. So that's it for this one, guys. Have a nice one. Make sure to leave a like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you back on the next one. Bye-bye.